Good evening. It is Thursday, January 28th, 2021. This is the normal meeting of the governing body of the City of Spring Hill. We welcome everyone both online and in the audience tonight. First order of business, as always, will be our invocation. Those who wish to, please stand and join us in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you to once again have this opportunity to come together as your children and to make decisions that we hope honor you. We ask that you allow us to draw from your strength and your courage and your wisdom in order to make decisions that are in the best interests of our community as a whole. We thank you for the love and grace and protection that you offer our community, that you offer our first responders, that you offer our military and our military families. We are so very grateful for the many blessings that you bestow upon our community, and we ask that you continue to bless us. In your name we pray, amen. Amen. Please continue standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Leeton?
Here.
Mr. Owen?
Here.
Sorry. Mr. Graves?
Here.
Mr. Eckert?
Here.
Mrs. Hughes? Here. Mayor, we have a quorum present.
Thank you very much. Next item is approval of the agenda. I have no requested deletions. I do have a requested addition for an executive session. Topic would be anticipated litigation. That would happen after announcements and reports. Are there any council requested additions or deletions or changes?
Mayor, move to approve the agenda as revised.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0-0. This takes us to citizen participation. This is an opportunity in the meeting for residents to address the council on items not already on the agenda. Anyone wishing to do so, we just ask that you step up to the lectern, state your name and address for the record, and then you'll have the council's attention. Hearing none, we'll go ahead and close that portion of the meeting and move on to the first of two presentations. Our first one will be our 2020 year-end Police Department report. Chief Hinson.
Thank you. All right. Thank you for this opportunity to present our overview of activities in 2020. 2020 obviously proved to be quite a challenging year. A lot went on. However, when we look back, we were able to accomplish many things. Do we have my slide thing up there? I have to hit it? Nope. How do I get back? Go backwards. We're missing like some of my slides. Oh no. We're missing the two best ones.
Oh, here. We can use this thing, right? I need for
what, though?
I have not. You can put, oh, but you're going to read off of that?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, my two best slides are missing. I'm sorry?
Is it in an email somewhere?
I emailed it to Ashley.
Drop it up there real quick? No. Sorry.
Okay. Well, don't look at this one. Anyway, one of our 2020 achievements included defining our mission statement. As you may recall, in 2019, we defined our core values. And so in 2020, we moved further down the road and identified our mission statement. It was a collective effort by all of our members of our department and was designed to complement our core values and our goals of the city. Our mission is to serve with integrity, to enhance quality of life for our Spring Hill community. We also managed to make it through 2020 without any COVID infections, which, talking to some of my comrades and peers in the county, that is quite a feat to do. I mentioned last year that there are 3 core ideas associated to effective policing. The first is to prevent crime, And you're really not judged on necessarily high arrest rates, but more so by the community with low crime rates. The second is to earn public support, and the third is to earn that support by respecting the community's principles. I believe our police department has met these core ideas. And in our efforts to do so, we identified 5 priorities rather. This is a really cool slide that's not there. So our priorities there are 5 of them. One is crime, traffic safety, employees, community outreach and problem solving. And then the last one involves technology, equipment, and training. These priorities align with the goals that the city set in 2020, transparency and communication, budget, financial planning, the infrastructure, developmental, performance development, quality of life. It also supports what the community expects of us, which is the enforcement of traffic laws, investigation of criminal activity, participating in community outreach, being visible and engaged, respectful and fair, and being responsive to calls for service. The next slide is our organizational chart. We're set up with 3 field supervisors. They are sergeants on each shift. Each shift currently has 2 officers assigned. Our administrative assistant also handles records, warrant entries, and property. And our detective also assists us with background investigations for employment. So now we're on this slide. Our first priority is crime, and that is to maintain or reduce crime by supporting crime-reducing objectives and goals, providing high visibility with traffic stops, citizen contacts, and quality investigations. You're going to see that the vast majority of all of our crimes that we track are all down or at the same. I consider battery with 1 change difference virtually the same. This is very common across the board in the metro area where person crimes, violent crimes went down in 2020, but property crimes went up. The clearance rates, we did go down in clearance rates. A lot of that has to do with leads, opportunities. If there are things with absolutely no leads, those cases are going to be very difficult to clear. The high lethality on domestic violence. So we had 22 domestic violence cases in 2020, and each officer on those cases are to complete a high lethality evaluation. And the goal is to create, to try to break the cycle of violence, and so that we can get the help needed so that the person does not become a repeat victim. And in those cases, we identified 5 of those 22 that had high lethality. Our next priority was traffic safety. And again, like everything else in 2020, people were not on the roads. With people stay at home, a lot of our activities went down. So with regard to accidents, both injury, non-injury, and fatality all went down. Alcohol-related events were virtually the same, and all of the enforcement went down. Some of the things that we took in, that we did as a result of the lockdown and the initial COVID warnings was we reduced our amount of proactive work to focus on when we had to have contact with citizens, and then we could do that. But it was in efforts to reduce the amount of contact we had, so that we would reduce the likelihood of any kind of exposure. We also had 5 traffic complaint areas. This is usually when a resident calls with a concern of speeding or other kind of stop signs or any kind of violations or traffic violations in their area. We had 5 of those last year. We worked a total of 55 hours at those 5 locations, wrote about 27 citations and arrested 2. Oh, I forgot to, I want to go back one more because I forgot to point out our response times, because response times is one of the things that, being expedient in our response is something that we believe our community wants. We had 6,200 calls a little over 6,200 calls for service last year. Our overall response time was just basically 3 minutes, which was slightly faster than it was last year, and well below the benchmark of almost 5 minutes. That benchmark is based on the average of the county areas. So we are very responsive when called. Oops. Our third priority is our employees. We want to attract and retain quality employees. We want to be safe. We want to develop our employees and recognize accomplishments. This year was really about safety. It was keeping everyone's reduction of COVID exposures and attending to mental health welfare, because as you know, that wasn't just COVID that we dealt with. There was a lot of conflict, and the police was a big part of that conflict. And even though we were fortunate not to have it occur in our city, our officers watch television, and there's a lot of anxieties and questions and discussions. So their mental health was something that was very important to us that we needed to address. So just prior to pre-COVID, we did reach out to Always and Forever, and they had some of the dog residents come and visit us. They did a little field trip. It was a lot of fun. We had some donations of masks and sanitizers from our local businesses, which we very much appreciated. Several of our officers attended mindfulness training, which focuses on meditation and breathing. We also had Deputy Weiss and Canine Gus, which is at the sheriff's office, and it's literally a dog that you can go and pet. So he came over a couple times, and we kind of relaxed with him, and he had some lunch with us, and it was nice. You can see on the board that in 2020, we have allocations of 15 officers, sworn officers. We were able to hire 3. Unfortunately, we had 2 that left, one literally just 5 days after we had hired them. And to show you kind of how competitive it is and how difficult it is to get hired, we had 57 applications. 24 of those were interviewed. Much of those 24, the reason why they were interviewed is because, number one, they took the test and they passed. Some of those that did not get interviewed either did not follow through with taking the test or they did not pass the test. So out of those 24 that interviewed, we were able to hire 3. We also think it's important to recognize our officers. It's important to build confidence and teamwork and promote a healthy environment and reinforce expectations through example. So we had 23 compliments last year. Those either come from the residents and public who feel so inclined to send an email or a phone call, which we very much appreciate, or it's internal. It's your coworker or your supervisor complimenting good work. We also recognized 2 for life-saving awards last year. Okay. Our 4th priority is community outreach and problem solving. And this is really preparing for future growth, engaging the community through outreach and education while optimizing our social media platforms. And being involved with the community is very important. Last year, we were able to participate in a few events and grow our connection with our residents through social media. Obviously, our ability to get out and participate in community events was significantly impacted by COVID-19. But prior to the lockdowns, we were able to do at least one coffee with a cop. We also participated in National Night Out, Spooktacular, Drug Take Back, and Blue Elf. And we really hope to do more with National Night Out this year and Blue Elf, along with a lot more, with several more hopefully in 2021. The 5th priority and our goal is to provide effective equipment and technology to assist our officers in their job, becoming the best trained department of our size while focusing on 5 foundational tracks critical to establishing an effective police department. Just to highlight a couple of things for equipment, Nico had a good year last year, so there was a new bite suit for training, got a new e-collar, a new doghouse, and even a new car. So he made out. He's feeling pretty good, but he was really busy, and I will talk about that next. We had 3 vehicles that we were able to replace. One was the K9 SUV. We had a new patrol pickup that replaced the old animal control truck that we had years and years ago. And we are getting our 3rd SUV that it's getting upfitted right now. So that will replace another car. Created a fleet maintenance program so that we could extend the life of the cars that we do have and keep them on the road. Technology, we implemented SmartForce, which was a platform that allows, it's basically a one-stop shop. Officers can, on their phones, on the MDT, on laptops, can access not only their policies in the field, they can access roll call in the field, warrants, any assignments, TCAs. It's a great place for all of us to kind of communicate better and be able to get that information at our fingertips. We tested and evaluated new body cameras for 2021. We've moved some of our functions and records to be paper light, and we implemented barcodes for property tracking. With regard to training, a lot of our training was canceled. But some of it moved to online, so we were still able to get our training in. We're required to get 40 hours every year. As you can see, we average well over that. In 2020, we had over 1,000 hours of training, which averaged out to be about 81 hours per officer, slightly lower than we did in 19. So there's some of our department highlights. Nico, like I said, he was very busy. I believe this is probably his most active year since he has been on patrol. He had 76 deployments. 31 of those included building searches, tracks, and article searches. They are considered patrol deployments. 45 of those were narcotic deployments where, it could be on a traffic stop, et cetera. He averages about 20 hours a month in training, 247 for the year, and assisted outside agencies 55 times and within Spring Hill 21 times. The vast majority of those outside agencies occurred in Olathe and with Spring Hill right behind it. Some additional highlights, records, they began entering and removing warrants for our agency in the spring of 2020. Prior to that, dispatch, Johnson County Sheriff's Department would enter it. So at the beginning of the year, we probably had close to 90 warrants that we needed to enter into the system. It was quite labor intensive. It took quite a while. Since then, they've entered 54 more additional warrants into the system. We currently have about 210 active warrants right now. She also does, Records also does monthly validations. So you have to, every month, they will send a validation on stolen tags, guns, and warrants. And you have to make sure everything is still valid and do those things. So there's about 8 to 10 every month that she has to do. She completed 162 record requests. And as you can see, fingerprints we were very popular because I believe we were the only ones still doing them. So we had 79 people come to do fingerprints here in Spring Hill versus 11 last year. Policy, we implemented 41 new policies. This was a very complex process. As you know, we approved a partner to help with our policies back in late 2019. So much of 2020 we spent updating our policies. We worked closely with our policy partner, our sergeants and officers, to implement these policies and made sure that they are current, they represent best practices, are legally defensible, and provide officers guidelines in their day-to-day work. Property. We have submitted about 187 pieces of property this year, purged about 464. There were 133 cases, so some of these cases had multiple pieces of property. 17 items went to the lab for further testing. And we have just under 1,000 items of property in our property room. Sergeant Vinsel and Officer Sisson spent a very long time. It was quite, again, labor intensive to do an audit of our property room. It took well over a year to do. It required purging items that were no longer needed for court, tracking down owners to return property recovered or seized. And then we also implemented a barcode system. So now when an officer comes in, they enter the piece of property into the records management system. They apply a barcode to it. It's a sticker. Then when they put it into the intake, the property clerk, which is the admin assistant records person, she'll take it in and it'll put it on a shelf, and we can all track it with our records management system. So it's much better than spreadsheets, much better than hand hash marks. And I'm very confident that will allow us to do audits more effectively and be able to better track what we have in our systems. Animal control, as you can see, we were down in our calls for service. Mostly we deal with dogs, mostly at large. We did have an increase in our bites this year and impounds. What's in store for 2021? Well, we're going to continue to upgrade our systems and equipment. We hope to be able to upgrade our body cameras, our in-car radios, and e-ticketing, move to e-ticketing and wireless uploading of our in-car cameras and body cameras. We'll continue to build training programs and tracks, and we'll offer services. We hope to get back to some of the services we'd like to bring back and start up again in programs for our citizens and hire those approved positions. We did appoint Officer Delgado as a community liaison, so he is going to help us with trying to connect neighborhoods and the police department. And our goal would be at some point being able to have an officer that each neighborhood knows who to call. So they have their own officer. So that is an end goal that I hope that I don't have a time frame as when that will occur, but that's where we're trying to go. And lastly, I just want to thank our generous Spring Hill citizens and business owners. They always take care of us, bringing us some goodies and some cards. We had a picnic and bench built as a part of an Eagle Scout project by Jake Lockard and Troop 85. We're excited to use that bench, and I actually saw somebody sit on it one day. I was always so excited. I went out and I said, "Thank you. I think you're the first person that sat on our bench." And the picnic table, I'm excited to eat my sandwich out there someday. So when it's not so cold. But anyway, that kind of concludes an overview of the police department for 2020. Any questions?
Chief, a couple of things that I'd like to see going forward are kind of some comparisons, how our community compares to other communities with regard to type of crime, quantity of crime. Another area that would be of interest, I think, is the assigned versus initiated actions. I mean, certainly traffic stops, we understand, are self-initiated actions, but there are a lot of other activities that police officers undertake. I don't know if you track that way. If you don't create a method. I know my past experience, we track those. But things like business checks and vacation checks and elder checks, those things that folks have the ability to sign up to. I think it would be nice for the community to see how much extra work your officers are doing in addition to the thousands of calls for service that they receive each year.
Any other questions or anything else? Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for your hard work and the hard work of your officers. You do a great job.
Thank you.
I was wondering if there was anything or any way that we could engage the citizens to help with the clearance rate, with tips, with any kind of information. I know that people, especially when they're on neighborhood.com and things like that, are very interested in their neighborhood and the community and would like to, if they saw something that they knew related to a potential incident, like a car broken into or something, maybe it would jog their memory and they could put in that tip. They just didn't know that it was important that they saw something. I think that would be something that we could interact with the public on and maybe get help with them.
Okay.
There's a lot of sleuths out there.
Yeah, there is, and it's, and we do have the ability to have a tips hotline. Anybody who were to call in for the tips hotline, that would get routed to us. So that is something that we already have access to us, but we can look at other options and other ways to try to
Maybe
encourage that.
an unsolved kind of site to where it gave little highlights of the area, the date, and what happened. Like a car was broken into in this neighborhood at this time of night on this date, and then it would jog somebody's memory that they maybe saw something. You know, just a little detail, not enough to mess with your investigation in any way, but.
Historically, I think the council and community was presented with a quarterly kind of overview or recap, kind of what the mayor was stating about. Mr. Mayor, is that jogging anything with?
Yeah, no, we did have some quarterly details, much like the fire department does. I think it became somewhat onerous, but I think maybe with some newer software packages that you have, that some of those statistics might be a little easier to pull.
So the information that I gave you today is now in a position where I feel that the information is the most accurate that we have. It only pulls what I showed you. Anything else, we would have to go and hand tick. So I am in a position where I feel like I can give quarterly updates, and I know that's something that you have asked for in the past, where I feel like it is something that is accurate, and not just me going through and hand counting stuff and hoping that I didn't miss something. We have reports that are generated on a regular basis, so I should be able to provide you quarterly dates to what I have been able to show you tonight.
I know the citizens like to hear that in the council meetings quarterly. Many of them have commented on that. If you can click back to your training slide, if you would, please. Okay, so we're down some, and that was, and your opinion was that was because of COVID?
Yes,
Is that a lot of those things were canceled and whatnot. Mental health has impacted the community as a whole pretty significantly with all these COVID type of lockdowns and restraints and things of that nature. Can you expound a little bit about what kind of training the officers have in regards to mental health and how much more they'll be exposed to or have available for them going forward?
sure. So we do have, our goal is to train everybody in CIT, which is the critical incident team, which is crisis intervention team, I'm sorry, crisis intervention team. We had several scheduled last year, but it was canceled. So we have, hopefully we'll be able to get that back into, I believe we have 4 right now that are certified in CIT. We also every year attend first aid, or mental health first aid. That is something that not only does it address their own mental health, but also it refreshes our training in the aspect of when you're dealing with somebody who is in a mental health crisis. We also have a policy that's very specific as to how we handle mental health incidents, and we are working together with Johnson County with the co-responder program. So we have the ability to have the co-responder come out on emergency situations. And I'm hoping that at some point we might be able to find some avenue in which we would have access to a co-responder to do some follow-up, and not just on an emergency basis, that can help our citizens deal with the crisis that they may be in.
Well, I'm certainly concerned with the citizenry, but also with the police department as they stay healthy and wise throughout this as well. So thank you for expounding on that.
Do you have any idea about how many times we've actually had to use the co-responder? Have we used it much? Have we used it a lot?
I don't have those numbers with me. I did have it when we were originally in talks with Johnson County to see if we could make some arrangements to have to actually partner with them to have the co-responder as someone that we didn't have to go to Johnson County to get. I know of at least 3 of residents where the co-responder helped us out because we were spending quite a bit of time and multiple calls for service at those homes. And she helped out a great deal to try to reduce that recidivism and get the help they needed.
Because my understanding is that program is actually very unique in that it was actually started, I think, in Johnson County or something like that.
I believe so. I believe Olathe had the very first one. And that was probably 10 years ago.
So
And then I think
it's something that people are actually coming to this area to get information and training on.
Right.
And,
And some of the larger agencies are going toward a more of a unit.
so,
But I do have a meeting on Monday to discuss that opportunity to have a co-responder. So,
Very good. Anything else? All right, Chief, thank you very much. An excellent presentation.
thank you.
And next up is our year-end report from Community Services and City Clerk's Office. Madam Clerk, you have the floor.
I don't know how to get this.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, for having the opportunity to share with you what we experienced in 2020. 2020 will be remembered as the year of COVID-19 and how it affected our personal lives and the challenges within our work environment. The offices look quite different today, not the open environment that we all were accustomed to. With the CARES Act funding, we were able to install cubicle partitions with windows and order personal protection equipment along with hand sanitizers and disinfecting wipes, which we truly appreciate. Following is a preview of the events that we were faced with in 2020. On March 19th, Mayor Ellis declared a state of the emergency for Spring Hill. This included all city facilities closed to the public. However, this did not disrupt the customer service that our employees provided. Customers were able to conduct their business through the online payments, outside drop box, over-the-phone payments, and the U.S. mail. And then thanks to Mayor Ellis, we worked with the school district to provide a grab-and-go meal station in the Civic Center back parking lot, and that was on March 24th. On March 26th, the city council meetings, we had temporary procedures for city meetings in effect, and we used the go-to meeting, which is all new terminology for everybody that we experienced for sure. April and May, our courts were rescheduled. And on April 27th, the City Hall conducted a food drive for the community food pantry at Life Spring Church to coincide with the hashtag Together Spring Hill. May 21st, City Council held their first Zoom meeting for the 2021-22 budget presentations. On June 2nd, Municipal Court was back in session in person. City buildings would reopen no sooner than June 8th. On June 21st, Spring Hill Court held in person with modified hours for the Civic Center. During court, the Civic Center is closed for public business from 8 to noon, and then regular business hours resume from noon to 5 for the Civic Center, and we still are following that schedule. The schedule has proved to be very helpful for us because when people attending court come in, we have a one-way system of the direction of which way they go. And then following, when court is finished, our custodian is to thoroughly clean the facility before the public can enter the building. On September 1st, our city prosecutor Nate Sutton resigned, and then Mayor appointed acting city prosecutor Andrew Bolton. On the week of November 9th, our deputy city clerk Ashley Wood virtually attended the Kansas International Institute of Municipal Clerk Certification Institute. Ashley is working on obtaining her CMC, which stands for the Certified Municipal Clerk. And then the following slides will compare the numbers between 2019 and 2020. Oops, I'm not on, sorry, wrong way. Oh. Okay. So our staff has our receptionist, who's really more of a customer service representative, and our municipal court clerk, and then our deputy city clerk, which I share with Mr. Hendershot as our executive assistant. The municipal court numbers, as you can see, are all down, and that is, I'm sure, directly due to COVID hitting us. You know, people were working at home, they weren't out, they weren't driving, so that really affected our numbers in municipal court. The one good thing that happened is that we were able to complete the video arraignment with Johnson County, and I really would like to thank Mr. Smoot. He's the one who coordinated that project through Johnson County. Actually, we were having court one day and we kept hearing this ring, and we weren't expecting it, but it was actually Johnson County calling in. But that has since been fixed, but yeah, it was exciting to see the system work. Our judge was able to speak to the defendant at the courthouse, at the jail, and it just worked better. It's safer for our officers that don't have to go with it and then bring them here to City Hall. So it's a great project that is completed. I'm glad to report that. And our animal licenses, there was some decline in all of those. And as you may recall, the City Council repealed the pet license requirement beginning in 2021. And I don't think we've heard any complaints about that. So that was a a good thing for our residents not to have to deal with that. And as you can see, it was declining anyhow. So, and I'm not sure what the reasoning for that is, if people just weren't getting out to do that, or that many animals have left Spring Hill. I'm not real sure. And then the liquor license, they really haven't changed. The one thing, the cereal malt beverage special event was for Fall Festival. Normally, they get a special event temporary C&B license, and as we all know, Fall Festival is canceled this year, so that is the reason for that. And then the liquor license special event down below was when the Bowery had that concert. And of course, then with that many people attending, you would not be able to have an event like that due to COVID.
I just want to clarify, Madam Clerk, it was canceled last year. Fall Festival has not been canceled for this year.
Oh, yeah, right, 2020. We're on 2020. Sorry. No, 2021, we're open, so I'm sorry if that came out wrong. And then our massage establishments, they have not changed at all. We still have the 2 in town. Records requests, whoops, I did have an increase in that, a 39% increase. And we are, as you know, reviewing our process in that, and that will be continuing at our next meeting. And this is just a fun little tidbit that I wanted to add. And I only have the data for 17 working days, and these are the incoming calls into our main city hall number. And it does not include the rollover, but it just kind of gives you an idea of how many calls do come into City Hall. And so from 12/21 to 1/26, and that would be 17 working days, we had 459 calls still coming into City Hall. So people still call in and needing help, and we assist them in however they need their, with help. And I am really seriously, I thank you for the equipment needed to keep our staff safe during this pandemic is truly appreciated. And I open the floor for questions
Any questions?
or comments.
Certainly a lot going on in your area, and I know it was a particularly challenging time for the court. And I just wanted to commend you and Judge DeCiso and Dawn and our entire court team for how professionally everything was handled. It is not uncommon for me to get a complaint or 2 or 10 about happenings in the court, and that has not occurred in some time. So I think in particular, last year would have been the prime time to expect those types of complaints. So, Madam Clerk, I just want to commend you and everyone involved in municipal court for your efforts in keeping things moving along.
Thank you. Anything else? All right.
All right, this takes us to the consent agenda. I do want to point out and welcome Jessica Glavis. She is here with Quick Trip. She does not need this pulled from the consent agenda, but she is here if anybody does have a question and feels that it does need to come off of the consent agenda. We appreciate Quick Trip sending a representative, Jessica, and we welcome you.
With a question, would that move it off the consent agenda? If we got a question for her, Mr. Mayor?
No.
No. Okay. I've had some people have concerns about light pollution. Are you familiar with that, and do you have any comments you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, you please do.
Good evening. I am Jessica Glavis with Quick Trip. Do you need my address? I'm not sure.
Business address would be fine.
All right, 5725 Fox Ridge Drive, Mission, Kansas. And I am familiar with that. We actually submit with our site plan a photometric plan which measures the foot candles that are put out on our lot. And I'd have to get out the one for here, but we typically do not have any spillover on the property line.
If you could submit that, I think that would be good for all council to see that.
It has been submitted.
It's
I believe I did.
It is
in the
submitted.
council
It's in the
packet.
packet.
Yes.
I overlooked that.
So,
Very good.
all right, thank you very much.
Absolutely, we're excited about this project.
Oh, I think
you.
we're more excited. All right. If there are no other questions, would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0-0. Ms. Glavis, again, thank you for joining us. We appreciate that. To our one and only formal council action item, this is consideration of resolution number 2021R-03, consideration of acceptance of donation for Veterans Park from Alan and Pam Knable. Mr. Hendershot, you have the floor.
Thank you, and good evening, Mayor and Council. It's exciting to stand here before you this evening. If you'll recall, last year, Alan and Pam Knable very generously made a $50,000 donation towards Veterans Park and then pledged an additional $50,000. I'm happy to report that that has been received, as well as an additional $7,000 from Mid-Am Supply. A few months ago, we adopted a donation policy that does require a donation of $50,000 or greater to be submitted to the council, along with a resolution to formally accept that donation. There are some criteria that the city administrator is to review on that donation. Those criteria include the donation is in the best interest and is consistent with applicable city laws, policies, ordinance, and resolutions. Does the donation have any special interest, and if so, are those restrictions acceptable to the city? Whether the donation creates an obligation of the city to make an immediate or initial expenditure which has not been included in the budget. And lastly, whether the donation creates a new or one-time or ongoing general maintenance obligation for the city. In reviewing those criteria, I offer the following for your consideration. It is, in my opinion, that this donation is in the best interest and is consistent with our city laws, policies, and ordinances. The donation does have special interest, in particular the continued development of Veterans Park, specifically the Veterans Memorial. Mr. Knable assisted city staff and consultants with the development of the conceptual plan for the Veterans Memorial and Pavilion and strongly desires this plan become a reality. This donation does not create an obligation for the city to make an immediate or initial expenditure that's not included in the budget. It is the desire of the city to complete the conceptual plan to honor our veterans. Conversations with Mr. Knable revealed his desire to utilize the funds as a starting point to the Veterans Memorial in hopes of stimulating additional interest from residents and businesses to donate to this project. City staff is coordinating with our design consultants on ways to utilize the funds at the memorial in a manner that will show progress toward the project and stimulate this additional interest in a manner that will allow continued construction as funds are available. The last one deals with the maintenance. This donation does not create a maintenance obligation for the city that has not been contemplated with the project. It is my privilege to recommend to the city council that Resolution 2021-R-03, formally accepting the $50,000 donation from Alan and Pam Knable to be utilized in the development of the Veterans Memorial at Veterans Park. Any questions?
Mayor, I move to approve Resolution 2021-R-03 as stated.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? I would just like to add that I know there are so many things in our community that Mr. and Mrs. Knable have touched that no one knows about. And I have an inkling that it would have been their preference that they be able to donate this and not have the whole world know about it. And our policies are designed to ensure transparency. Our policies are designed to ensure the integrity of that system, not in any way in an attempt to embarrass anybody, nor is that what I'm trying to do now, other than to say what an incredible gift to our veterans. At least three in this room now. And when you talk about what somebody can do to touch a community, what somebody can do to bring a community together, that really embodies the Knable family. So, Mr. and Mrs. Knable, on behalf of the city of Spring Hill, thank you very much. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0-0. This takes us to our one and only discussion items, hot off the press. Ms. Landis, you have the floor.
Good evening, and it is not fair for you to rat me out like that. So just for that.
It was fresh and up-to-date information.
It absolutely is. And this is going to look like a really long presentation, but honestly, it is a combination of different requests that we've received from the council over the last probably month and a half. And so I have included it all in the presentation. I do want to make it very clear that while I was working with Mrs. Hughes and Mr. Graves on some fund reserve questions and the use of some carryover dollars. I was separately working with Mr. Leeton on some detailed requests of specific financial information to include in the presentation, but I want to make sure everyone knows that those conversations were never mixed and no one ever saw the other side, so we wouldn't have any problems there. And I want to make sure that we thank each of them because they did spend quite a bit of time talking with me and working through some of these details just so we could put together a pretty comprehensive presentation and answer some of those outstanding questions we had. I really want to start here with the general fund, and most of this presentation is really centered around performance, more financial status and performance as opposed to just exactly the detailed numbers. You'll see some tables and you'll see some charts in here, but really they're both there for you to be able to pick and choose what makes the most sense to you and look at what you would like to focus on. Really, in the general fund, we spent time every month since the beginning of the pandemic, or since probably March or April of last year, reviewing the financial status of several funds that would have an impact or could potentially have a revenue impact to them. The governing body made some tough choices, and we did some really upfront work, which was selecting positions to be frozen for the remainder of the year. We did a lot of conservative spending, our aquatic center closure for the 2020 season. We had some staff vacancies that while those positions weren't frozen, they did remain unfilled. Those presented some challenges to staff, but they also did end up contributing to the bottom line savings overall in the general fund. We were lucky enough to weather the storm pretty well on our revenue sources overall, which was a great surprise, I think, from where we started at the beginning of the year. We were hoping that it would be good, but we planned for the worst, and we really did weather that storm pretty well, at least through the end of the year. We know that there's still the potential for some things to come at us. And then to the right, there's just a small table here that shows you that just the 2020 revenue minus our 2020 expenditures in the general fund did result in a net asset increase of $195,000. This is a breakdown of that $195,000. And again, these are tables that are really here for your viewing pleasure, and you can pick and choose what you'd like to from here. But I want to just bring your attention to the largest two revenue sources in the general fund are our ad valorem property taxes and our sales tax, our sales and use tax. All of the other revenue sources make up for approximately 25%. But our top two revenue sources, being just the property and sales tax, make up 73% of our revenue in the general fund. So for those that don't follow the financials closely, that's why we had such a large concern at the beginning of last year, is because we knew that the potential was there for either one of those large sources to not meet our budget or our budgeted numbers. And so we wanted to make sure that we were in a safe position throughout the year. Our general fund expenditures, you can see in this table that the numbers on the right are really the budget remaining. That's a little confusing in the table as I look at it now. The numbers in the actual and projected column, the middle columns, those are the two columns that make up the actual net asset increase. The right numbers are really the budget savings, or the amount that was in addition to the budget collected for revenue. So I want to make sure we don't get those. I really have about 3 things going on this slide. Do you have any questions on this slide? No. As we get further, if you do, let me know. Because we were talking about property tax and sales tax, in this slide, I have really pulled out 3 pieces of information. We've talked about in the past, we've talked about delinquency percentages, we've talked about how do we budget for delinquencies. So really what we're attempting to do here is to show you what those delinquency impact was and in all of our funds. So we have 4 funds that receive property tax receipts, and that is the general fund, the debt service fund, the fire fund, and the cemetery fund. And in each of those, the table to the left, that is a combined total for all 4 of those property tax funds. And you can see at the very bottom, that is a line for budgeted delinquency and actual delinquency And you can see at the end of 2020 that for all 4 of the funds, our delinquency total was $47,000. So we really are sitting in our actual delinquency at somewhere around 2.5%. We talk often about budgeting a 2% delinquency. Mr. Leighton and I talked earlier today that maybe we need to start budgeting for a little bit more until we're certain that those times are headed back in the other direction, so we can have a little more of a safety net in those property tax funds. That's something that we'll want to talk about as we get into the budget review for 21 and 22 again. Do you have any questions on this slide? Again, there's some illustration there, but really I wanted to draw your attention to those couple of numbers because we've talked about those in the past. Sales tax being the other main revenue source in the general fund. We talked about, I've used percentages in the past in our conversation, and this is really a much larger illustration, but with the use of numbers. And in your green column, you can see the percentage of the total sales tax budget in the general fund. We have several sources of sales and use tax in the general fund. And the city sales tax itself makes up 51% of the general fund, or about $920,000. Miami County is 16% of the sales and use tax revenue, and Johnson County is about 33%. The total sales and use tax budget in the general fund is $1.8 million. So here you can see what the percentage is, and you can see what the budgeted dollars are overall. Everything in the blue is related to the actual collections of sales tax. And to give a couple of examples of why the question came up in the last couple of presentations was, if you look at line 1, the city sales tax itself was up 5.1% over the budgeted amount for 2020. And that 5% equated to $37,000. But if you look down below for the Johnson County use tax as an example, it was up 34.2% over the budgeted amount, but the amount that we were actually over budget was only $23,000. So you can see how those percentages do represent different dollar amounts. I want to make sure that you've got this information in front of you. If you do have questions, please let me know about the types of sales tax. We did see large increases again in our use tax, but you can see that even with those large increases in use tax, it did not top the receipts that we would have in our sales tax. It's just that use tax, being a smaller revenue source, generally had increased, quite some amount over the previous years. But really, in the grand scheme of things, it didn't necessarily create a really large revenue stream. We do have 2 of our special sales taxes, one from the city special sales tax that's designated to recreation down below, and also the most recent special county sales tax from Johnson County. Those 2 revenue streams go to 2 separate funds. One is specifically there, and the Johnson County special sales tax, we do use it to fund particular projects that are coming up. We've talked about that during the budget sessions. We've kind of assigned where those dollars are going as they come in. And the special city sales and use tax down below, it is specifically used right now for the payment on the Veterans Park general obligation bonds, and also the remaining payments on the aquatic center construction. So that's where that special sales tax is going currently. In the future, as those bonds start to pay off, those dollars will become available for other recreation type projects in Spring Hill. This is a slide. I didn't pull out this revenue stream in the previous slides as being one that was of significant value. However, it does come in as one of the higher other revenue streams in the general fund for development fees. And we do also have an excise tax fund. And that fund is used to fund a lot of our future street improvement projects due to development. And so I thought it was a good idea to put this in here so you can kind of see what our activity has resulted in. Mr. Burton brought to your attention during his annual report at the last meeting that we had started to see a lot of development. We had more plats coming in. We've seen a lot of permits issued. And really, these are the results financially of that development. So if you look at the blue line, that is development fees. We did collect $400,000 in development fees in 2020. And the red line is showing not that we had negative or no excise tax coming in, but we had declining amounts of excise tax coming in over time. And from 2019 to 2020, we have seen that reverse and start to bounce back up. And the two reasons for that are listed on the right there. We had previous final plats from several years ago that are finally now under development and or have been completed. And as a result, we're seeing new plats come in for new subdivisions. And because of those new final plats coming in, that's where we're collecting now excise tax again for something that wasn't previously on the books or a planned project. Do you have any questions about the development revenue here? No? Okay. Special assessments was one of the topics of discussion in a previous meeting, so I've provided two different tables here. The top one to show the difference between what we certify to the county annually, what we budget for delinquency of those special assessments, and what the actual delinquency was. That's in the first table. So in 2020, we did certify to the county $1.1 million in special assessments. We did budget for that delinquency a little bit higher than normal of $128,000. Our actual delinquency was $45,660. So the result of that is that in that fund, you will see some carryover move to the beginning balance of the next year, and that will help offset the delinquency in future years. It can also be moved to our fund reserves in that fund as well. So we'll look at an overview of that debt service fund when we get into more of the budgeting process and look at those reserves. The bottom table is related to a conversation that we've had multiple times throughout the last couple of years about just benefit districts in general and what is outstanding. We were able to get this information from both Miami County and Johnson County, and we appreciate them pulling that together for us. Currently at this time, prior to December of 2020, taxes going on to the tax roll. So this would be anything that's billed prior to that. We do have about $340,000 in outstanding special assessments. That would be for as far back as each one of these districts go. So that is not from 1 year, but it is those are outstanding amounts per district. So you see that the three districts that are in delinquent status are North Sanitary Sewer number 1, number 3, and the South Sanitary Sewer District with a very small amount. So all of our brand new districts or newer districts to the tax rolls are actually caught up to date, but these two are the ones that have the most outstanding assessments. I did leave in here 2 slides about the 2 utilities. I don't want to dismiss them. We do have an extensive conversation about these utilities throughout the year, so I did include in here, really I wanted to focus on a couple of performance points on the right. In our water utility, we did add in the year of 2020, 27 new water customers. I know that Mr. Burton told us that we had started to see an uptick in the permits issued for a development that's in our water district. And you'll see that those development fees look to be lower in 2020. But we do also have a deferral program for those system development fees. And oftentimes our developers will take advantage of that. So you'll see those revenues come in, but sometimes we do cross years. And so by the time they come in, within the next 4 to 6 months, you'll see that revenue stream actually in the next or the upcoming year instead. We have accounts receivable or outstanding receivables of about $23,000 in our water fund. In our sewer fund, we did add 164 new customers in 2020. And we do have accounts receivable of about $60,000. This fund is a little different in collection of outstanding bills as the water fund. We do have areas of Spring Hill that do not exist in our water district areas. So typically when you have a customer, a sewer customer that's in our water district, we're collecting the full amount of the bill when we go through the water shutoff process. When you have a sewer customer outside of that water district, it's a little more difficult to collect. So if payment is not made, we're having to go through the collection process, which is a lot more lengthy process. You'll see that in 2020, we collected $886,000 in development fees. These are system development fees that are intended to be used specifically for the sewer collection and distribution system. Okay, that is what I had for financial overview of 2020. Do you have any questions on those numbers? A lot of it is stuff that you've seen before, just in a little bit different manner. No? Okay. So a conversation that the mayor had asked Mr. Graves and Mrs. Hughes and I to talk about fund reserve balances. And we had an opportunity to do that 2 weeks ago. And again, this week we had a follow-up conversation. And I've provided to you here in this packet just kind of a worksheet. It's a worksheet because fund reserves are not something that is there are best practices out there, but there's no set solid standard that says you have to do one thing or another. So it's really about comfort level. It's about your risk analysis. It's about looking at each one of your funds and determining what is the opportunity for you to not bring in the sales tax or the property tax that you need in those funds to be able to support your future projects and or the expenditures that are necessary in that one particular year. So really our focus for property tax delinquencies and sales tax would be the top 4 funds: the general, debt service, fire, and cemetery. The best practice for the general fund is 16.7% of your general fund balance or 2 months of operating expenses. Currently, we have a reserve in that fund of $750,000, and that's sitting somewhere around 13%, or about a month and a half of operating expenditures. We did take a look at this fund. We decided that yes, it would be beneficial to add to this reserve, but we do have some recommendations on how we could do that. We really looked at this from the big picture perspective, so we also considered the debt service fund. And in this fund, we only have a balance in our reserves of $5,000, but we have about $315,000 of annual debt that is supported by property taxes that doesn't have another revenue source. So we decided that we may want to put some of our focus there first, and that we would want to build that to some percentage of that property tax supported debt that would make us comfortable if for some reason those property tax delinquencies were to go up, and or if we had any issues from or with our 10 largest taxpayers and those assessed valuations that may impact our ability to collect taxes and or our mill levy going forward. So we did come up with the idea that we would like to contribute to that fund and build that reserve if possible in the future as well. The fire and cemetery fund are both contract funds. The fire fund supports the contract with Johnson County Fire District Number 2, and the cemetery an appropriation amount that's awarded based on their needs for running the Spring Hill Cemetery. And so both of the importance of the revenue or reserve amount in both of those funds is to make sure that you can pay the contracts each year or the amounts that need to be paid. So I think that for the most part, we were comfortable with the reserve balance in those funds. We probably would like to take a look at that fire reserve and maybe bump that up a little bit if at all possible, just to ensure that there's enough there to make sure that the contract amount is paid annually and that we didn't need to have to transfer money from other funds to cover that. The other funds that are out here, most of them, those reserves are for future projects, and so we budget the full reserve. We don't feel that we needed to insert or add to the reserves that are already there, with the exception of the special highway fund, because we felt that there was a need there. To touch on the water and sewer fund, we do go above and beyond on our reserves there, so when we do have our rate setting session, we may want to consider what our options are there as far as the amount for reserves and how that might impact any type of recommendation for rate increases. As a follow-up to that conversation, we talked about carryover balances and how we might be able to fund some of those reserve balances and what our recommendation might be there. Would either one of you, do you guys want to talk about this, or do you want me to cover it and then insert any comments you might have?
That's good. If you want to start with it.
Let's start with it? Okay, absolutely. Okay, so a lot of these are just bullet points because that's really our conversation was bouncing a lot of ideas around on how we might be able to use the funds that might be available in the general fund at the end of this year. And I know we talked about increasing our assets by 195,000, but we had that amount in addition to an amount that rolled over from 2019 to 2020 as well. This is an approximate amount. Please don't hang your hat on this amount yet. This is a really early presentation about the end of 2020 because we have to leave our books open for probably another 30 days and pay any of those invoices that would have come in that were dated for services in 2020. So this is an approximate amount. But really our recommendation here is that we set this amount aside. And that what we would do with this amount would be to focus on at least 85% or somewhere around that percentage number of whatever that carryover dollar amount is, and have that support future street projects. We talked about the street maintenance projects. We talked about there's other larger projects that may need funding. We do know that there is a current street maintenance plan being prepared by the city engineer. He has indicated he would have that available in the first quarter of this year. And that any remaining dollars could potentially be put towards any, or earmarked for some future economic development projects that may come about for any expansion, new projects coming to Spring Hill that we may need to be able to fund some projects for. So we talked a little bit about, do we want to fund the reserves immediately, or would we recommend to you that we would add to our reserves immediately? And our answer was based on the comments that came to us from our rating agency, and that they were comfortable with the liquidity of what we had available then. And we're not asking or recommending that we spend any more than what we had rolled over in this current year in our out of our cash reserves. So we were recommending that we would move the increases or small incremental increases to our fund reserves out and start maybe in 22 or 23. And one point to consider is that we may have additional or new sales tax revenues coming in by that time. And so we would be a little more comfortable in our balances and our general fund and being able to support some of those other projects. And so we may be able to feel comfortable about increasing the reserves at that time as well. I want to jump right back up to that green table. So what we felt was a responsible plan here was that there would be some trigger points for releasing those funds that we would have earmarked at the end of this year, or for the end for the monies from the end of last year, and make sure that we were comfortable with releasing those and not needing to put them back into the general fund to be able to operate and provide 100% of our services to the community. So these were some trigger points we came up with, or targets. Once we've collected 50% of our ad valorem budget, once we've collected 100% of the first quarter of expected sales tax, we could release 25%. And then we would release the remaining balance after we've collected 100% of our second quarter sales tax, or we've exceeded our development fees by $100,000. Those are all just suggestions, ideas. Obviously, there's probably 10 different ways we can go with this. This was the base of our conversation. Would either one of you like to add to it?
Yeah, I would. So, just so I explain comprehensively what we looked at. We looked at all of the expenditures that we didn't fund last year, all the CID projects, anything that was left over, and we talked about changes that were made. And then we discussed this number. Melanie says to us, we have about $795,000 rolling over because we tightened the belt. We were financially responsible last year, and because we had great partners in the community who came in and developed in Spring Hill and paid permit fees and development fees and still continue to grow our city. This $795,000 is not earmarked for anything yet, but we wanted to come to you with a suggestion for the earmarking. We want to put it towards roads. We haven't done significant interior road projects in many, many years. We want to say, please, the rest of the council, consider earmarking about 85% of this number towards roads and summer projects this year that would contribute to the interior roads. We've asked that, that the roads, master plan, and what is he calling that?
A street maintenance
The
plan.
street maintenance plan be updated as soon as possible, and it be categorized by similarly situated streets. So if like 5 streets throughout the interior of the city needed mill and overlay, that those be categorized that way, so that when we did spend the money, we could do it all at one time for one team, a mill and overlay team, a chip and seal team, and items like that. The one thing we didn't want to do, though, is to spend the money too quickly. We didn't want to say to ourselves, we have this rollover, let's immediately earmark it towards something. So we put in trigger points, and we've almost met these already, just so you're aware. We did go over the numbers of ad valorem collection so far. I think we're at like 48 or maybe 52 already percent for December collections. And sales tax is also very high, so by the time we're ready to bid the project and do the project, if we can get these road projects done this summer, we don't see those trigger points being an issue at all, where the numbers of collecting those particular taxes are going well.
I think what I'd like to recommend there, Ms. Landis, is that council members Graves and Hughes and you meet with, for example, community development and public works. Those would be 2 areas that I can think of that there might be some competing interests there, and make certain that those dollars are in fact going to their highest and best use. There's no question up here that streets are a priority. I'm not absolutely certain if there are other priorities that may be driven by community development. So I want to make certain that the council gets the most current information. Would that be agreeable to the 2 of you?
Yeah.
Terrific. And that sound like a good approach, Ms. Landis?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Mr. Hendershot? Rest of the council? Okay, very good. So let's go that route, and then when do you anticipate we might have something come back? Second meeting in February, first meeting in March?
Sure, yes, we could do that. We can have that conversation at any time.
Okay.
At this point, there is nothing precluding us from just earmarking and holding these dollars at this point. The decision can come at any time that you wish.
Okay,
So,
Okay.
sure.
all right.
But I do have a couple questions on it. The 795, I mean, that was not an all 1-year thing. I think that is a running balance over years. We had 195, like 500 or whatever it was from last year, added on to get us up to the 795.
Yes.
So that's not just good practice in 1 year, it was long-term good practice over many years that has gotten us to this point. That said, you're saying 85% of the carryover, but we're sitting at, I'm just asking the question of why you went this way. We're sitting at 13% in the general fund, and recommended practice is 16% with 1.5 months versus 2 months. Why not, and I'm just trying to get under your thought process, why not go ahead and fulfill that piece of it and then modify this down to 80%, 60%? I'm just asking, what was the rationale?
So we looked at, we compared best practices versus rating agency practices. They have been consistently strong with us leaving the 13.5% in the budget. We did 85% because we believed that there might be 15% for any kind of economic development. There was a few IT things we left out of funding this year. And to bring the debt service up to the 15%, because the tax number, the number of debt service that is serviced by taxable dollars is only 300,000. 15% in debt service is only 50,000. So we could make that number within that 15%. So we gave ourselves wiggle room with the 85% recommendation.
Okay.
But we still agree that 15%, we can decide to use that any way we wish. But we
both agreed that, or we all three agreed that we really wanted to push the 85% towards roads. It's one of the most commonly complained about problems. It is a problem to where it gets exponentially more costly to fix it as you let it degrade. It is something that is currently, because more people are at home now, it is causing, more of the issues, and we've had roads discussions since I've been on council. And I do remember that we had a road study done when we color-coded the roads. And if we don't start chipping away, pun intended, at the amount of money we need to put towards roads, our numbers will keep going up. What was the number that we received when we did the roads project? We color-coded the severity of the roads. Was it, what millions of dollars was it at that time?
Yeah.
15.
$15 million. Now, one of the things we did talk to Melanie about, because this is a drop in the bucket of that particular number. One of the things we did talk to her about is while we are doing the roads maintenance plan, if we were to categorize roads by the need that they have, the actual service needed to them, then we might be able to put many roads together each summer and maybe do some kind of bond, go out and actually fund it through long-term financing. If we got enough roads together that needed the same type of repair, we could fund that through a large summer project. But we don't know, because we don't have that report yet. And we were pushing to get that done next month so that we could start really looking at what we needed to put the money towards at that time.
I mean, that folds in with the thing that I've been talking to Mr. Hendershot about for, a significant period of time, about the street rating index, but also providing a overall rating index based off of function, level of service, other things that come into it, and then having an overall, so then what you end up is investing in roads based off of not just the pavement condition, but average daily traffic, all these factors that come into play, so that when we make an investment with this number here, we're actually doing it in such a way that we're not just doing a shotgun approach, thinking that we're gonna hit the best. So I fully support it. I mean, this is something that I've been a proponent of heading for this direction for years, and been in Mr. Hendershot's ear many a time about. So, yeah, I support going that route. I just, I don't want us to lose sight of it, but us, this is really kind of what we're looking at is instituting a long-term asset management plan for our streets and roads and trying to determine a way to finance it.
And don't get me wrong, I looked at the numbers. So Melanie got me the debt service sheet that I wanted to see, and we checked all the interest rates on all the loans and all the repayment plans on all of those loans to make sure that this money wasn't better served bringing down a rate or looking at that first and then debt servicing the roads. But Melanie has done a wonderful job. We didn't see but, was it three items on our debt service that were over 3% interest rate. Most of them were below 2%, and the 3% were closing within the next couple of years. So we've already paid that interest. We can't really, bring that down to affect that number in any way. It cost us enough to refinance it that it would to just continue the payment plan. So we took a clear look at that because I am all for, making the most of what your money can get.
Right, but isn't
at
it,
the cheapest rates.
isn't it fair to say, in regards to Mr. Leeton's comment, this money is an accumulation of several years? Now, 2020's been an atypical year, right? Because we had a big influx.
No, we've had some years that have been pretty good. I mean, we'd have to go back and look at the actual numbers, but we were
Right.
what? If you take basically the 795 and take 195 off, it was about 495. It was 495 last year, I believe is what the actual number was.
It was
You and I
500.
talked about that this afternoon, about what the actual carryover is. But it was about 495 before this year. We're up to 795 now. not 495, 200, 590.
Thought it was 195.
Well, no, it was 195 is what we actually carrying over this year.
I
It's
think
getting up to
we took-
795.
we took those funds and we used them for something. I think we took those funds and we said, okay, so if we do have this 195, we needed to put it towards some of the police officers and something else we added back in.
No, the actual carryover number was, the 795 includes the 195 this year. So,
It
see what we're
does.
talking about.
So the carryover from 19 to 2020 was $599,450. And we had budgeted to use 400 and some $1,000 of that carryover in our regular operations. So when we actually carry over like 1 point something million, you subtract out that 750,000 that we always say we're not going to touch, and that's what's remaining. And typically, that does get budgeted as part of our operations for the year. And because we didn't spend all of that last year, but also because we had unanticipated revenues from development really over the last couple of years that have really contributed to that balance rolling. And that was especially the case from 19 and now also in 2020, those numbers from development really helped to drive that additional amount that did move. Can I backtrack to your original question about the reserves and why we had recommended that we just defer adding to those till later? So the mayor has brought this up a couple of times, and it's a great question because we always want to make sure that our rating agency is still happy with what we've done, because it's been 3+ years since we've really established that reserve amount. And when we established that amount, it really did meet the best practice percentage out there at the time, because our expenditures in our general fund were slightly lower. So as our expenditures overall have started to increase, we haven't added to that fund reserve, and that really is a good question. When we went back and we looked, and I did reach out to Baker Tilly to help with this, to a couple of the comments that came from our last bond rating is that we did still have a very strong liquidity. Those were in quotes position of 94, just under 95% governmental cash to total governmental expenditures. And we carried an amount above 90% for the last few rating cycles. And this was one of the reasons the city has such a strong rating. But the caution would be don't look to spend down a lot of your available cash or those reserves that we do actually have in place. And I think that's the key to what we're talking about here. These are funds that were unanticipated. They're funds that came in without an earmarked expenditure. We're looking to move those to be able to help us either reduce interest or forego some of those additional future costs that we can't control. And we're not necessarily spending down cash that we had already. And I think that's the key to this whole conversation. And so I think it's also very important to note that we do want to, and we should want to add to the reserves in the future. And that if we can do that by small increments over time, that would make sense. And some of that planning was that if we really do need to get some dollars into our street maintenance program and get started, then this would be a great time to do that. And as we continue to get additional sales tax revenue streams into some of our funds, then we can easily and readily add to those reserves, maybe even starting next year.
Dedicated revenue stream is essential. And there are two other factors here. The first is we're talking about what are some astronomical numbers for a lot of people. And they're relatively small numbers in relation to the city's budget. One of two things has to happen, and either of them bring a benefit to the resident. They either need to be able to see where money is being spent, or they need to see where money is not being spent and see their taxes go down. Here is a one-time kind of lump sum, and if we can identify highest and best use for streets, as well as supporting some development initiatives that are in the pipeline, I think that satisfies the needs of the residents. Because if we don't make those investments in development, then we don't have those high sales tax generation businesses coming in. So I think we're on the right path, but I think everybody here, I'm just gonna vocalize what I know everybody here is thinking. We've got to bring something home where people are gonna wonder, where is my money going? I'm delighted you have such a high savings account. I don't. That's what we need to be aware of, and that's what we need to continue to work for.
And that was the idea with the roads, really pushing that. It was that's the thing we hear, and it's like, we have this opportunity to be serious about roads, let's do it now. And that's where the 85% came from. And I will say just one other thing, every bit of information, every document we asked for, Melanie was able to provide, so thank you for that on those calls. Felt very well informed to make those decisions, so thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else from Ms. Landis?
Well, I do want to talk about, again, back to the approximate 795. Now, is that actual true cash in hand, or is that an asset based off of what we're doing? You and I talked about this.
Yes, this would be actual true cash. It is an actual fund balance. You will see it as I prepare the 21 budget. If we were to leave it in the general fund, or the 22 budget, I'm sorry, you will see it become a rollover to the beginning of the 21 budget unless we move that out to a fund where it can be earmarked for future use. And so that's really what we're requesting of you, is to ask that we could go ahead and move those dollars out to a separate fund where it can be held aside and it could be earmarked for future use. Whereas under the current budget, the existing budget for 2020, there was budget authority where we could do that. If we wait much longer, we could, or we close the books on 2020, we would need to do a budget amendment in 2021 to make the transfer out. Those are just administrative tasks. But those are good questions, but that is actual true dollars available to do projects with or to transfer to some fund to be used.
And we're only talking for the year 2021, correct? Okay.
Yes. I do want to, if I could add just one quick comment. In fact, Mrs. Hughes has already touched base on all of this. I wanted to just give one piece of example, I guess, for what we talked about. She talked about the debt reduction. That was a question we had. At the time, we were talking about the $50,000 in rollover dollars that were from the payment or the reimbursement of expenditures under the CARES Act last year. And we had said, can we reduce any debt to do that? So really, there's a lot of bullet points here, but the bottom line is, in support of what she was saying, was most of the debt that's sitting out there, the closest debt that we have for payoff right now is the 2016 A issue. The amount outstanding is $287,000. And there would truly only be a minimal interest savings there. Your other option is you could pay off your equipment leases early, and you could save the interest that's out there. But you do pay the bulk of your interest at the front end of those leases. And so one example of a lease that's sitting out there, by contributing even $50,000 to paying it down, your interest savings is only $3,800. And so the reward is not necessarily there for the cash that you have available. And so that whole concept can be carried over to the conversation that we just had. So really, this is just information for you, but if you have questions about that, you certainly can let me know.
All right, anything else? All right, Ms. Landis,
No.
thank you very much. Council members Hughes and Graves, thank you also for the time that you put into that.
Thank you all.
All right, that takes us to announcements and reports. I have a few things. Long-term employee and current codes officer Trent Wimpy is retiring. I believe tomorrow is his last day. If you have the opportunity, please send him an email, stop by, give him a call, wish him well on a career well-served. And Trent has been a long-term member of our community as well. I think he's looking forward to becoming private citizen. But please do remember and congratulate him. A few calendar items to cover. The Chamber of Commerce is working on restoring the legislative breakfast, and it will either be February 20th or February 27th. We don't have a date yet. We have agreed to host it in the gymnasium. We believe we'll be able to appropriately socially distance. We'll be able to, of course, maintain the requirements of the Johnson County Health Official, which have been extended right now until March 31st. Also, Barbecue on the Hill is scheduled for February 24th, and if anybody plans on attending, please, either of those events, please let the city clerk know so appropriate notice can be sent out. We have, over the course of the last couple of meetings, and of course we'll have some upcoming as well, been hearing a lot about the activities in 2020 of some of our departments, and I just wanted to recap a few things. In the city clerk community, where we also have our municipal court, Ms. Garrity talked about a 39% increase in open records requests, 615 court cases, special licensing, and more that gets done out of that department with the equivalent of 3 3/4 full-time employees. In our police department, we heard about 6,285 calls for service. That averages to 17 calls for service per day. When you layer on top of that the 1,572 traffic stops, at 7,857 activities averaging to 21.5 per day, managed by just 14 people. In community development, we heard about over 200 code citations, countless other working with people on codes violations, 303 building permits, 183 of which were for new single-family homes. I'll remind you that last year, in addition to O'Reilly, which opened, we also landed Quick Trip, a 750-unit apartment project through Preeb Homes, as well as a few other significant businesses. That department all of that work is being managed by 4 employees. So I think oftentimes people think that cities are bloated. I think that they think that people work about 6 hours a day and then go home. That's not the case for your city employees. I'd like to take a moment to thank each and every one of you for your hard work, your dedication, and commitment. My streets are clear every snow event, and it doesn't matter what time of day the snow comes. My utilities work every single day, and I can count on police officers driving by my home no fewer than 3 times a day. And a call for service, based upon these numbers, tells me that help is on its way well below the average. Hats off. One last thing, I have already notified the council of this via email after the last meeting with the announcement of Mr. Hendershot's pending retirement in July, and I had announced last year that I was not running for a 3rd term. I think that 2 terms as mayor is sufficient, and I think it's time for new ideas and new energy to come in. The timing of his departure versus the timing of my departure is a little bit unique. I will not be appointing a new city administrator. Instead, I will appoint an acting city administrator, and I believe it needs to be up to the new mayor and new council to decide who will lead this city. I also firmly believe it's unfair to the residents of the city to attempt to fill that position at a time when there would be uncertainty of leadership. What that means is that there may be several applicants who self-select out because the uncertainty of leadership is more than they're interested in taking on. Once we know who the next mayor of the city of Spring Hill will be for 4 years, that's the time to begin the application process. So again, I notified the council of that previously. I want to make sure the public understands that as well. That being said, we still have a lot of work to get done in 2021, and we have a lot of great things in the pipeline. Mr. Owens.
Nothing, Mayor.
All right, thank you very much. Mr. Leeton.
Just one thing is Monday, Miami County tried to roll out their Tier 2 vaccination. It ended up being a very problematic thing on the Miami County side. And I think the system actually crashed on the phone system, and they had a lot of complaints by a lot of people on the Miami County side. I'm on Miami County. He and I had a conversation about it, and they're working on the county level to try to improve that process for the rollout. And when the Miami County gets that done, he said that he would work with their staff to make sure it got communicated to us so that we could disseminate that out to the public of how that would happen. So I just wanted to let people know that Commissioner Vaughn is actually diligently trying to work on it for the citizens in the area, and that had happened. The only other thing is I would request from staff, whether it's Mr. Hendershot or whoever, to provide an update on the kind of the plan for the Veterans Memorial inside the Veterans Park, where we stand with it, where we're going. We've had some significant contributions by individuals. I'd like to make sure that we're kind of staying on track with it, what the plan is, so that we can make sure that we're progressing towards that, because I know there is a lot of community interest and community support for that, so.
All right, thank you very much. Ms. Hughes. All right, Mr. Eckert.
No comment, sir.
And Mr. Graves. Move on to staff reports. Mr. Hendershot.
No report, Mayor.
All right, Madam Clerk.
No report.
Chief Henson. Wait your turn. Mr. Burton. Did you say no, Chief? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no report.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Burton? All right. Now you can go, Ms. Land.
You guys are making me look bad here. Oh, goodness, I only
Us or
have.
you?
Mine are just a couple of update things. We had talked in January that we would bring back to you the facility use agreement with the rec commission. That is ready to go, but we wanted to give the rec commission and the board an opportunity to see that first, obviously, in February. So that will come back to you at the second meeting in February. We did begin our utility assistance roundup program, the donation program, through the utility bills in January, and we have 26 customers signed up. So that's a great start to that program. If you're interested, please give our utility clerk a call or visit our website. There's a way to donate just online, and as well as get signed up for that monthly contribution.
Can I, yeah, I'm sorry, Ms. Land, because I do the auto pay, I don't log into my account. Can I log into my account and do that myself, or do I go to a separate spot on the city's website?
You can do both.
Okay.
You also can go in or you could just give us a call and we can set you up for it, so it will just automatically bill every month and you
Okay.
won't have to worry about that. Okay. And then just a third item, we have put out an RFP for private placement of an extension, well, it's for temporary notes. We had our 2019 A temporary notes that were due March 1. We don't have, a significant amount of time to get the assessment process completed before those notes are due. So we did put out the RFP for private placement. We included our four local banks in that, bidding process. There will be a resolution coming back to you at the February meeting. What that does is delay the assessment process for that project until next year. But after speaking with the developer, that's not a problem. It won't cause us any issues either, and we can give you a lot more details about that process at the next meeting.
Okay.
And that's all I had.
All right, Mr. Jenkins.
No report, Mayor.
Very good. Would entertain a motion to recess into executive session. Would request a 5-minute break before that. There is no anticipated formal action following that.
Madam Clerk, what time do you have right now?
On your computer.
20:38.
20:38, okay. So we'll start at 8:43. Mayor moved
Started
to,
at 8:45, that makes it a little easier for us to track.
hey, that's fine. I'm just going by the math. Talking to the engineer. So, Mayor moved to the city council recess in executive session for 15 minutes to the city to discuss anticipated litigation pursuant to the attorney-client exception KSA 75-4319B2 of the Kansas Open Meetings Act. The open meeting will resume in city council chambers at 9 p.m. Persons to be in attendance are the following: Jim Hendershot, city administrator; Patrick Burton, community development director; Frank James Jenkins, city attorney, starting at 8:45 after a 5-minute recess.
Second.
7 minutes.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. We'll be in recess until 8:45.
Mr. Leaton, if you could you show me, I pulled up this and we talked about that light from the, and you said it was on the plan.
Oh, it'll be in the
We are
building.
back. Session, the discussion was limited to the topic stated. No decisions were made, no votes were taken. Would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.